All right, so we've been going through the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, written by M, about his life. And, oh Lord, what did I just do? Okay. I just touched my screen and I was on another page. So, what chapter is this that we're in right now in this class? We're way into it. Chapter 20, Rules for Householders and for Monks. And he's talking about being a sannyas. And he was talking last week, remember, about that one should only teach after having been given instructions to do so, or having the I guess the endorsement of the divine to do that. And we were talking about that a little bit. And he continues on this week. He says, living as a sannyasi or as a monk is like observing the Ekadasi without drinking even one drop of water. So, of course, everybody knows the Ekadasi is that monthly done on is it the full moon or the new moon, Rena? You know.
I think it's new moon.
Okay.
No, I'm sure it's new moon.
Okay. So every month, that's a day of fasting and just remembrance of the divine. So you usually spend your day in practice and being quiet. And it's a very widely practiced one. So there's lots of traditions around how to practice it. And he's going to get into it here a little bit. He says, living like a sannyasi, it's like observing this Ekadasi fast without drinking even a drop of water. There are other ways of observing the day. You can eat fruit and take a luchi and curry. With the luchi and curry, you can also take slices of bread soaked in milk. Everyone laughs because these are, compromises for those people who don't want to do a serious fast. So they've got all these rules, as long as you don't have rice. Swami Prabhupada used to joke. He said, in India, if you haven't had rice, you haven't eaten. And so on Ekadasi, as long as you don't eat rice, everything else is fair game. But he's saying that, for the sannyasi, for those people who are going to take that path, you try to adhere to the absolutes. You try to walk the highest ideal that you can. He's smiling, continues, and says, absolute fasting is not possible for you. Once I saw Krishna Kishore eating luchi and curry on Ekadashi day. I said to Hriday, Hridu, I want to observe Krishna Kishore's Ekadasi. Everyone laughed. And so I did one day. I ate my fill, but the next day I felt like I had to fast. The devotees who had gone to the Panchavati to visit the Hatha Yogi came back. So at the Dakshineshwar temple, there used to be different sadhus that would come and stay on the property, sleeping under the trees or in the guest house, and they would take care of them. And at this particular time, there's a Hatha Yogi there who needs money. I think he says here in a minute. Anyway, he's here on the campus. And so some of the devotees had gone. Swami had sent them over to say hi to everybody, to the Hatha Yogi, and to see what he's like. The master addressing them, well, what do you think of him? I dare say you've measured him with your own tape, right? Because they were bad-mouthing him because he had asked for money, right, when he got there. Sri Ramakrishna saw that very few of the devotees were willing to give money to the Hatha Yogi. The master, you don't like a sadhu if you have to give him money. Rajendra Mitra draws a salary of 800 rupees a month. He had been to Allahabad to see the Kumbh Mela. I asked him, well, what kind of sadhus did you see at the fair? Rajendra said, I didn't find any great sadhu there. I noticed one, it's true, but even he accepted money. So this notion of accepting money is by a sadhu is a bad thing. But Thakur's making the point here. It's like, how else is that guy going to eat? He's not, I was going to say not allowed. Of course, he's allowed, but his vow is not to work in exchange for anything in this world, not to do anything karma creating. I say to myself, if no one gives money to a sadhu, then how will he feed himself? There's no collection plate here. Therefore, everybody comes. He's talking about Dakshineshwar. They didn't take any money there. So he says, so everybody likes to come here because they don't have to pay for anything. And I say to myself, alas, they love their money. Well, let them have it. The master rested a while. A devotee sat on the end of the small couch and gently stroked his feet. The master said to him softly, "That which is formless, again, has form. One should believe in the forms of God also. By meditating on Kali, the aspirant realizes God as Kali. Next, he finds that the form merges in the indivisible absolute. That which is the indivisible Satchitananda is verily Kali." Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the semicircular porch west of his room, talking with Mahima and other devotees about the Hatha Yogi. The talk drifted to Ram Prasanna, the son of Krishna Kishore. The master was fond of the young man. Master, Ram Prasanna roams about aimlessly. The other day he came here and he sat in the room, but he did not speak a word. He pressed his nostrils with his fingers, practicing pranayama. I offered him something to eat, but he wouldn't take it. On another occasion, I asked him to sit by me. He squatted on the floor, placing one leg upon the other. He was rather discourteous to Captain. I weep at his mother's suffering. To Mahima, Ram Prasanna asked me to speak to you about the Hatha Yogi. The yogi's daily expenses are 6.5 annas, but he won't tell you about it himself. Mahima, who will listen to him even if he does? Mani Sen of Panahati entered the room with several friends, one of whom was a physician. Mani asked the master about his injured arm. The doctor did not approve of the medicine prescribed by Pratap Mazumdar. The master said to him, "Why should you say that? Pratap is no fool." Suddenly, Latu cried out, "Oh, the medicine bottle has dropped and broken." It was not yet dusk. The master, seated on the couch, was talking to M. Mahimatran was on the semicircular porch, engaged in a loud discussion of the scriptures with the physician friend of Mani Sen. Sri Ramakrishna heard it and with a smile said to M, "There, he is delivering himself. That is the characteristic of Rajas. It stimulates the desire to lecture and to show off one's scholarship. But Sattva makes one introspective. It makes one hide one's virtues. But I must say that Mahima is a grand person. He takes such a delight in spiritual talk." Adhar entered the room, saluted the master, and sat by M's side. He had not come for the past few days. Master, hello. Why haven't you come all these days? Sir, I've been busy with so many things. I had to attend to a conference of the school committee and various other meetings. So you completely lost yourself in schools and meetings and forgot everything else? Adhar, everything else was hidden away in a corner of my mind. How is your arm? The master, just look, it's not yet healed. I've been taking medicine prescribed by Pratap. After a time, the master suddenly said to Adhar, look here, all these are unreal, meetings and schools, offices, and everything else. God alone is the substance. Everything else is illusory. One should worship God with one's whole mind. Adhar sat without speaking a word. The master, all else is illusory. This moment, the body is, the next moment it is not. One must make haste to worship the divine. But you don't have to renounce everything. Live in the world the way the tortoise does. The tortoise roams about in the water, but keeps its eggs on land. Its whole mind is on the eggs. What a nice state of mind Captain has developed. He looks like a rishi when he is seated to perform worship. He performs the arati with the lighted camphor and recites beautiful hymns. When he rises from his seat after finishing the worship, his eyes are swollen from emotion, as if bitten by ants. Besides, he always devotes himself to the study of the sacred books, such as the Gita and the Bhagavata. Once I used 1 or 2 English words before him, and that made him angry. He said, English-educated people are profane. After a while, Adhar said humbly to the master, Sir, you haven't been to our place for a long time. The drawing room smells worldly, and everything else appears to be steeped in darkness. The master was deeply touched by these words of his devotee. He suddenly stood up and blessed M and Atar in an ecstatic mood, touching their heads and hearts. In a voice choked with love, the master said, I look upon you as Narayana himself. You are indeed my own. Mahimatran entered the room, the master to Mahima. What I said about aspirants practicing continence is true. Without chastity, one cannot assimilate these teachings. Once a man said to Chaitanya, you give the devotees so much instruction. Why don't they make much progress? Chaitanya said, they dissipate their powers in the company of women. That is why they cannot assimilate spiritual instruction. If one keeps water in a leaky jar, the water escapes little by little through the leak. Mahima and the other devotees remained silent. After a time, Mahima said, please pray to God for us, that we may acquire the necessary strength. Master, be on your guard even now. It is difficult, no doubt, to check the torrent of the rainy season, but a great deal of water has gone out. If you build the embankment now, it will stand. So there's quite a bit of things in there that he talks about. This idea of monks and money, or sadhus and money. It always is a question, really, of where the heart is, right? Where the focus is. Because you go to some places, and they charge for everything. They charge you to go to the puja. Even San Francisco in the early days used to charge for their lectures. Back in the days in the old temple, because they had no money. Actually, two of the monks back then were asked to get jobs, and so they worked full time, but they donated all that money to the monastery. So they lived in the monastery. They were monks, but they were instructed to get jobs, and that the paychecks went to support the monastery in those days. So they had to take care of those things. But this notion, that what are we about? Not just sadhus and money, but all of us. Is it evident in our character, in our nature, that the divine is our focus, and that we accept the moment as perfect as it comes, right? And that we simply take it and put our love into it and return it as an offering. to live in a way like that doesn't make people feel like you expect something from them, or that they aren't free in your presence, that there's obligations or hidden expectations in the way you chit chat with them, or they talk to you and whatnot. And so really to keep that inner mind free of me and mine, to keep it free of that selfishness and seeing other people as means to our ends isn't a good thing. This idea also of Mahima, when he didn't, make it to see Thakur for a long time because he was all caught up in activities, and you just see Thakur, talking at him like, these things are unreal. Why are you getting caught up in all of this stuff? All of these things. Keep your mind free. This moment is divine. Enjoy the divinity of being. Stop coming up with narratives of hungers and needs and quests to go on to take up your time. Stop being distracted, and certainly not to the extent that you stop practicing, or that you stop, doing your spiritual exercises. He talked about that turtle laying its eggs on the beach and then going into the water, and that its whole mind is still, with the eggs. And of course, he gives that instruction too of that woman who works in the mill, right? And he says that she's working in the mill and she's flattening the puffed rice on the mill wheel, and she's with one hand she's nursing a baby, with the other hand she's scooping out the flattened rice and putting in the new rice, and then carrying on, taking the money from the person at the counter who just bought some flattened rice. And she's doing all of this, the whole time, but never forgetting where her hand is on that mill, lest it get pounded, by the milling machine. And he said that that's how we should live in this world, that we never forget God, the mantra running in the back of the mind. He said that 1/16 of your mind should always be on God, and that the rest you can do your duties with, but that at all times, the thought of the divine or the thought of the beloved or your nature or the ultimate reality should always be running in the background. Your discernment, right? That inner discernment of knowing all that changes is unreal. And so find that within yourself that's not changing. That is the only real thing. And to stay centered there, stay in that space. Right? Then he, of course, gives us that instruction on chastity, just telling us again how important it is. And he says, without that chastity, your work dissipates. It doesn't grow. And a lot of it, yes, you can go into the spiritual biology of it. I'm always very uncomfortable with those notions. I like to take things much more practically, but to engage the body for those material pleasures, it takes a full belief in the body. It takes a full reinforcement of your identity as body, and the same as for the person that you're with. You have to objectify them completely, for those functions even to work, and to engage in those, you begin judging the whole world. One of the startling things that Ramakrishna taught was that all of this Maya appears only because of lust and greed. That if it wasn't for lust and greed, we would see this moment as divine. We would recognize the divinity in it. And so this constant running after these things, that it's lust alone that makes us see gender and makes us see age and makes us judge people's looks as beautiful or ugly, fat or thin, old or young. All of these attributes become important to us from the perspective of whether, they're handsome or not, or whether we're interested in engaging with them or not. And, greed also in the world, the values of things, how to get more, seeing everybody as an opportunity for making money. We see what that's doing to our culture now. The greed has gotten extreme, and money has become, the major focus. That's almost the only thing we consider now. Can we afford it? It's no longer, they're not asking many more questions about things anymore. And so this notion, lust and greed, has created this world that we live in. And so to really within ourselves to live that life, that frees us from that doesn't focus on that doesn't have us defining ourselves by our attributes, whatever they are, whether it's our bodies or our minds or our ages or our jobs and whatnot like that. Chapter 21, A Day at Dakshineshwar. It's Saturday, April 5th, 1884. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and M arrives at the temple garden and found Sri Ramakrishna seated on a small couch in his room. A few devotees were sitting on the floor. The master was talking to them. Pran Krishna Mukherjee was there. Pran Krishna belonged to an aristocratic family and lived in the northern part of Calcutta. He held a high post in an English business firm. He was very much devoted to Sri Ramakrishna, and though a householder, derived great pleasure from the study of Vedanta philosophy. He was a frequent visitor at the temple garden. Once he invited the master to his house in Calcutta and held a religious festival. Every day, early in the morning, he bathed in the holy water of the Ganges. Whenever it was convenient, he would come to Dakshineshwar in a hired country boat. That morning, he had hired a boat and invited M to accompany him to Dakshineshwar. The boat had hardly left the shore when the river became choppy. M had become frightened and begged Pran Krishna to put him back on the land. In spite of assurance, M had kept saying, "You must put me ashore. I shall not walk. I'll walk back to Dakshineshwar." And so M came on foot and found Sri Ramakrishna talking to Pran Krishna and the others. The master to Pran Krishna, "But there is a greater manifestation of God in man. You may ask, how is it possible for God to be incarnated as a man who suffers from hunger and thirst and other traits of an embodied being, and perhaps also from disease and grief? The reply is, even Brahman weeps, entrapped in the snare of the five elements. Don't you know how Rama used to weep, stricken with grief for Sita? Further, it is said that the Lord incarnated himself as a sow in order to kill the demon Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha was eventually killed, but God would not go back to his abode in heaven. He enjoyed his pig's life. He had given birth to several young piglets and was rather happy with them. The gods said among themselves, "What does this mean? The Lord doesn't care to return to heaven?" They all went to Shiva and laid the matter before him. Shiva came down and urged the Lord to leave the pig's body and to enter heaven. But the sow only suckled her young ones. Laughter. Then Shiva destroyed the sow body with his trident, and the Lord came out laughing aloud and went back to his own abode in heaven. I like that because it reminds me that who is it? Nisargadatta Maharaj. He says there's one major difference between a worldly man and a holy man. He said the worldly man always leaves this world weeping, sorry for all that he's leaving behind. He says, but the holy man will always leave this world laughing, knowing that it was all a play, all a drama. Prankrishna to the master, "Sir, what is the anahata sound?" Master, "It is a spontaneous sound, constantly going on by itself. It is the sound of the pranava, Om. It originates in the Supreme Brahman and is heard by yogis. People immersed in worldliness do not hear it. A yogi alone knows that this sound originates both from the navel and from the Supreme Brahman resting on the ocean of milk." Little footnote there. According to Hindu mythology, after the dissolution of the universe and before the next creation, the Supreme Lord rests on the ocean of the great cause, also called the ocean of milk. So the ocean of the great cause. Prankrishna, "Sir, what is the nature of the life after death?" Master, Keshav Sen also asked that question. As long as a man remains ignorant, that is to say, as long as he has not realized God, so long will he be born. But after attaining knowledge, he will not have to come back to this earth or to any other plane of existence. The potter puts his pots in the sun to dry. Haven't you noticed that among them there are both baked and unbaked ones? When a cow happens to walk over them, some of the pots get broken to pieces. The broken pots that are already baked, the potter throws away since they are of no more use to him. But the soft ones, though they are broken, he gathers them up. He makes them into a lump, and out of this forms new pots. In the same way, so long as a man has not realized God, he will have to come back to the potter's hand. That is, he will have to be born again and again. What is the use of sowing a boiled paddy grain? It will never bring forth a shoot. Likewise, if a man is boiled in the fire of knowledge, he will not be used for a new creation. He is liberated. According to the Puranas, the Bhakta and the Bhagavan are two separate entities. I am one, and you are another. The body is a plate, as it were, containing the water of mind, intelligence, and ego. Brahman is like the sun. It is reflected in the water. Therefore, the devotee sees the divine form. According to the Vedanta, Brahman alone is real, and everything else is Maya, dreamlike, unsubstantial. The ego, like a stick, lies across the ocean of Satchitananda. Listen to what I'm saying. When this ego is taken away, there remains only one undivided ocean of Satchitananda. But as long as the stick of ego remains, there is the appearance of two, a boundary. Here is one part of the water, and there is another part of the water. Attaining to the knowledge of Brahman, one is established in samadhi. Then the ego is effaced. But Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge in order to teach men. To Prankrishna, but there are signs that distinguish the man of knowledge. Some people think they have knowledge. What are the characteristics of knowledge? A Gyani, a person of knowledge, cannot injure anybody. He becomes like a child. If a steel sword touches the philosopher's stone, it's transformed into gold. Gold can never cut. It may be seen from the outside that a Gyani also has anger or even egotism, but in reality, he has no such thing. From a distance, a burnt string lying on the ground may look like a real one, but if you come near and blow at it, it will disappear altogether. The anger and egotism of a Gyani are mere appearances. They are not real. Right? So he's saying that it's not deep. He says that the anger, at one point he says, anger of a sadhu is like drawing a line on the water with your finger. That yes, he can be angry, he can be intense in its moment, but you can come back 5 minutes later and there's no trace of that anger. And if it was you that he was angry with, you won't find a trace of it even then. There's no what do you call it when you hold a grudge towards someone. So it belongs just to the moment, because he's a free soul. He knows the oneness of these things. But it's interesting that as long as we have a body, we have those. We're part of that problem. Even an incarnation, Jesus wept. That's the shortest verse in the Bible. If you ever wanted to know. Yeah, Jesus wept, and he wept when Lazarus, his friend Lazarus was dead, and even though knowing that he was going to raise him from the dead, he still wept. Because Lazarus's sister was there, and she was weeping, and the mother was there, and she was weeping. So Jesus also wept, and then he goes in and raises him from the dead. But this whole notion of that, when the incarnations come, and when God manifests himself in his purest form for us or herself, then we, that he becomes like us. He feels what we feel and goes through what we go through. And that's the whole point of the incarnation, that the incarnation is for the bhaktas, for those who are of a devotional nature, for helping them realize God. And so in the path of bhakti, God always incarnates, and he's been incarnating for a long time, and he comes in that form, and he puts a handle on the ultimate reality, so that the incarnation is just a handle on the great picture of the ultimate reality, whatever that is. It allows you to develop that relationship, which helps you to purify, helps you to get an idea of an unconditioned love that you won't find in this world. There's nothing in this world to teach you about your true nature, your infinite nature, your deathless nature, your unborn nature, your infinite nature. There's nothing in this world that can teach you ideals. And so the beloved has decided to incarnate, to give us the ideal, to give us a manifestation of something near perfect, in order to draw our minds upward, in order to provide us with a faith and with an understanding, and giving us a real world example of what that would look like. And hence a Jesus or a Buddha or a Rama or a Krishna in that sense. He goes on to talk about attachment. A child has no attachment. He makes a playhouse, and if anyone touches it, he will jump up about and cry, but the next moment he himself will break it down. This moment he may be very attached to his cloth, but he says, my daddy has given this to me. I won't part with it. But the next moment you can cajole him away from it with a toy. He will go away with you, leaving the cloth behind. These are the characteristics of a Gyani, of a knower. Perhaps he has some luxuries at home, a couch and a few chairs and paintings and equipage, but any day he may leave all of these things and go off to Benares. According to the Vedanta, the waking state too is unreal. Once a woodcutter lay dreaming. When someone woke him up, greatly annoyed, he said, "Why have you disturbed my sleep? I was dreaming that I was a king and the father of 7 children. The princes were becoming well versed in letters and the military arts. I was secure on my throne and ruled over my subjects. Why have you demolished my world of joy? But that was a mere dream, said the other man. Why should that bother you? Fool, said the woodcutter, you don't understand. My becoming a king in a dream was just as real as my being a woodcutter. If being a woodcutter is real, then being a king in a dream is also real. Prankrishna always talked about jnana. Was this why the master described the state of a jnani? Now he proceeded to describe the state of the vijnani, right? Which is even higher than that. This is the vijnani is the super knower, right? And so he's talking about the notion of we think that the dream is different in the sense that it's unreal, that it's completely made up in your mind. And yet the sages say that this world is exactly the same. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it is quite obvious that it is the same. That right now we've talked about the light that hits your eyes. Here, once again, I'm going through the same description. But that light hits your eyes, but it never makes it to your mind. It never makes it to your brain. It stops at the back of your eye socket, hits a wall, it shines off of those cones, the retina or whatever is back there, and it gets encoded into data. Your mind gets that data and produces that as a symbol for what that data represents. But we don't know how true it is. We don't know where that data comes from, right? Because the eye is just as much a symbol as the data itself is. So we have no demonstration of this world being real. We think this is wood, but in our dream, this could equally be wood. And in the dream, you could slice it thinly and put it under a dream microscope, and it would show you the cellulose cells and everything, and you'd be shown, oh, this is wood. It's the same in this world. It is not. All of this is made out of what? Mind stuff, dream stuff, right? We live in a mind, not in a world. There is no external world to us. And so this is what this sage is pointing out. My world with my 7 sons and me sitting on the throne is just as real as this world, where I'm sitting here as a woodcutter, trying to get my wood piled high. And so this notion that don't think for a moment this world is real. That which is unchanging alone is the reality. And of course, I always go through the same steps of talking about this stuff because I just remember going through it with Swami Prabhutananda the first time that I heard this, that which changing is unreal and that which is unchanging alone is real. And I thought, wow, finally, a nice concrete piece of information that I can do something with. And so I went up to the shrine. I sat there, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours that morning, trying to think of that one thing that was unchanging. I I really couldn't do it, And I went down at lunch to Swami sitting at the table. I was like, Maharaj, tell me more about this thing that we read this morning, that the unchanging alone is real. I said, I was all ready to go and find it. And I said, I couldn't find it anywhere. And of course, what was his answer? His answer was, did you consider that which was looking? Did you consider that which was looking? That thing in you, which is looking for the unchanging thing, is the thing itself that is unchanging. That sense of being that has been with you all of your life, even though your body and your mind have both radically changed, are actually not even recognizable compared to the bodies and minds that you've lived in this one life, And so to keep your eye on that one unchanging thing, find it, because that is the center of your bliss. It exists in the shrine of the heart, and you can follow Om down there, or you can look at a picture of your favorite grandchild or your favorite partner and feel the love that you have for them, and then abstract that love away, from them. Let go of the object and focus on the feeling of love itself. And that also can lead you to the shrine of the heart. But the shrine of the heart is the home of the unchanging absolute, as it were. It's where the love of God becomes you in this world. The master, jnana, is the realization of the self through the process of neti neti, meaning not this, One goes into samadhi through this process of elimination and realizes the Atman. So not this practice. Why would it be that? Because you see, anything that is on that side of your senses, on the detectable side of your senses, is not going to be you, right? Because it's being observed. And so we go through and we discount everything that can be observed, whether it's the thoughts of our mind, the mind itself, the body itself, all of our memories, all of our friends, all of our activities. All these things are always on the other side of the senses. And we spend all of our time totally enthralled by them, the stories that they're getting us involved in and telling. And so because we're all wrapped up in the changing, we're all caught up in these narratives which don't exist. They're simply narratives of mind. And so through this neti, we eliminate them. We say, not this, not this, not this. And ultimately, after you've negated everything, you back into reality, as it were. You become aware intuitively of the self, right? Of that Satchitananda, that source of love, that source of wisdom, that being, existence itself. So one goes into samadhi through this process of elimination and realizes the Atman, right? That it's that thing, the Buddhists call it nirvana, that emptiness. The Vedanta calls it the fullness, but it doesn't matter because it's the state of one without a second, right? So who's describing it, and who's to be described? And so anything that you say about that final highest realization is going to be a metaphor at best and an outright lie if anything else. So there's nothing to be said about this. So Atman is sort of a non-word for a state that can't be described, can't be named, can't even be given a word. Ramakrishna says that highest reality is the only thing that's been untouched by or unstained by the tongue, unpolluted by the tongue. And so we call it Brahman, but that's just a bare necessity. It cannot legally even have that name on it. It cannot be limited even by that name. And that's why they call it one without a second. If you say it's just one, then there's a second implied, right? If you say it's one without a second, that's saying the same thing, but the one's no longer implied. And it's not limited to one. It's it's one and more. Anytime you talk about God, you always have to put that little tagline "and more" on it, since there can be no limitation, no restriction to that love, to that divine ideal. But vijnana means knowledge with a greater fullness. Some have heard of milk, some have seen milk, and some have drunk milk. He who has merely heard of it is ignorant. He who has seen it is a jnani, but he who has drunk it is a vijnani. That is to say, a fuller knowledge of it. After having the vision of God, one talks to him as if he were intimate, as a relative. This is vijnana. First of all, you must discriminate, following the method of neti. He is not the five elements. He's not the sense organs, nor the mind, nor the intelligence, nor the ego. He is beyond all these cosmic principles. You want to climb to the roof, then you must eliminate and leave behind all of the steps, one by one. The steps are by no means the roof. But after reaching the roof, you find that the steps are made of the same material, brick and lime and brick dust, as the roof is. It is the supreme Brahman that has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles. All right. So there we now have a name for this mind stuff, this dream stuff. It's the supreme Brahman that has become wood in this dream of ours, that has become flesh in this dream, has become metal, glass. All of these different elements are a single substance, a magical substance, really, but a magical substance that's really magic and that we really are in touch with. It's that mind stuff that creates an entire universe while you sleep in real time. All of the people and places and mountains and whatnots that are in there, all of them will look just as real as this world. And you can explore them as deeply as you want, like this world. And they will not betray their real nature to you in that sense. You must know who you are in order to know what that is, right? So the Atman has become the five elements. You may ask why the earth is so hard if it has come out of Atman. All is possible through the will of God. Don't you see that bone and flesh are made from blood and semen? How hard sea foam becomes. After attaining Vijnana, one can live in the world as well. Then one clearly realizes that God himself has become this universe, has become all these living beings, that he is not outside of the world. And these are all those things that we use for helping with our devotion, you know. So if I look over at Cassie or anyone else in the room or Bhagavan there, I'm only seeing God, right? I'm only seeing the divine. And so in only seeing the divine, I should treat only the divine. I should respond to only the divine in everyone and everything around me. So I should treat nothing too casually without respect and appreciation, with this knowledge that I'm not touching the wood of the chair. I'm directly interfacing with Brahman, with that which pervades everything. It's Brahman with Brahman, right? To Prankrishna, the fact is, one must have the spiritual eye. You will develop that eye as soon as your mind becomes pure. Take, for instance, the Kumari Puja. I worshipped a virgin. The girl, to be sure, had all of her human imperfections. Still, I regarded her as the Divine Mother herself. On one side is the wife, and on the other, the son. Love is bestowed on both, but in different ways. Therefore, it comes to this, that everything depends upon the mind. The pure mind acquires a new attitude. Through that mind, one sees God in this world. Therefore, one needs spiritual discipline. Yes, spiritual discipline is necessary. You should know that a man becomes easily attached to a woman. A woman naturally loves a man, and a man also naturally loves a woman. Therefore, both fall speedily from their spiritual ideal. But it also must be said that there is a great advantage in leading the life of a householder. In case of urgent necessity, a man may live with his wife. Smiling. Well, M, why are you smiling? M to himself. The master makes this much allowance for householders since they cannot renounce everything. Is complete and absolute continence impossible for a householder? The Hatha yogi who had been living in the Panchavati entered the room. He was in the habit of taking milk and opium. He did not eat rice or other food and had no money to buy the milk and opium. The master had talked with him in the Panchavati. The Hatha yogi had told Rakal to ask the master to make some provision for him, and Sri Ramakrishna had promised to speak about it to the visitors from Calcutta. The Hatha yogi to the master. What did you say to Rakal about me? Master. I said that I would ask some rich visitors to help you. But, to Prankrishna, you perhaps, do you like these yogis? Prankrishna remained silent. The Hatha yogi left the room. The conversation went on. The master to Prankrishna and others. If a man leads a householder's life, he must have unflagging devotion to truth. God can be realized through truth alone. Formerly, I was very particular about telling the truth, though now my zeal has abated a little. If I said I shall bathe, then I would have to get into the water of the Ganges, recite the mantra, and sprinkle a little water over my head. But still there would remain some doubt in me as to whether my bath was complete. Once I went to Ram's house in Calcutta. I happened to say, I shall not take any luchi. When I sat down for the meal, I felt hungry, but I had said that I would not eat the luchi, so I had to fill my stomach with sweets. Everyone laughed. But my zeal for truthfulness has abated a little now. Once I said I would go to the pine grove, but then I felt no particular urge to go there. What was to be done? I asked Ram about it. He said I didn't have to go. Then I reasoned to myself, well, everyone is Narayana, so Ram too is Narayana. So why shouldn't I listen to him? The elephant is Narayana, no doubt, but the Mahut is Narayana too. Since the Mahut asked me not to go near the elephant, then why shouldn't I obey him? Through reasoning like this, my zeal for truthfulness is slightly less strong now than it was before. So he was just talking about, that he would get into these moods where, he tells that one story where he told one of his neighbors that he would come visit him, and the day passed and he never got over there. And as he was getting ready for bed, he realized, oh, I hadn't gone to my neighbor's house. And so he literally, got himself back dressed up again, took his lantern and walked all the way to the neighbor's house. And of course, in India, they don't have doors on the huts. And he just pushed the curtain aside and just touched his toe to the inside of the man's house. And then he was free to go on back home because he did, in fact, go to the neighbor's house like he promised. And so it seems funny, but you see, when you get to those levels of practice, where the mind is that pure, to where that makes a difference, that's where he was. But then once you reach that level, then you go vijnana, you go a little bit beyond it, and you realize it's not about the thing itself, and so it's not quite as tight as that. So he's making that point that he went through that period, and we see him going through other different moods about what he was able to eat, or there was one time when he wasn't able to touch money at all. If someone put money in his hands would curl in a weird way, and there would be a great pain. He was tested by Vivekananda, putting coins under his mattress on his bed to see if he was noticing, to see if he would notice. And that night, Ramakrishna got in that bed. He was so restless, he couldn't get comfortable. And he got up, and took the whole bed apart and found this money stuffed underneath and laughed because he knew immediately what the story was. And so you see the intensity of his practice. My goodness, you read some of his sadhana in the Great Master, his body would change based on the sadhana he was doing. This is since we're all devotees, we can talk about it. Normally I don't talk about this stuff, but that when he was worshiping Ram as Hanuman, he lived in the trees for like 6 months in the temple garden, was naked up there and grew a tail. They said that he actually grew a tail. His body actually developed a tail because of the intensity of his focus, of his practice. When he became the handmaiden of the Lord, he lost his male structure, let's say. It says that it inverted, because his mind, he was so focused on being the handmaiden of God that the body changed. And of course, according to our spiritual biology, we shouldn't be so surprised because the mind is the creator of the body. So if the mind changes that absolutely intensely, we're talking at the same level as Jesus talked when he said, if you say to this mountain, throw yourself in the sea, he says, if you've got faith the size of a mustard seed, verily I tell you the truth, this mountain will throw itself in the sea. So, it's kind of like living at that level. That's where Ramakrishna was at, so he saw himself as a monkey. His body slowly began to actually, morph into that form. And his handmaiden studies and some of the other practices he went through. But you see, this isn't an ordinary person we're talking about. We're talking about somebody with an incredible control of their mind, incredible discipline of their mind. I find a change coming over me. Years ago, Vaishnav Charan said to me, one attains perfect knowledge when one sees God in man. Now I see that it is God alone who is moving about in various forms, as a holy man, as a cheat, as a villain. Therefore I say Narayana in the guise of a sadhu, Narayana in the guise of a cheat, Narayana in the guise of the villain. Narayana is the guise of the lecher. How now my problem is how I can feed all of you. I want to feed everyone, so I keep one at a time with me and feed him. Prankrishna looking at M and smiling, a fine man indeed. To the master, he would not let us go till we put him ashore. Master smiling, why? What happened? Prankrishna, he was in our boat. Seeing that the water was slightly rough, he insisted on being put ashore. To M, how did you come? M smiling, on foot. Sri Ramakrishna laughed. Prankrishna to the master, Sir, I am thinking now of giving up my work. One who is involved in activity cannot accomplish anything. Pointing to his companion, I am training him to do my work. After I resign, he will relieve me. Work has become intolerable. Master, yes, work is very troublesome. It is now good for you to meditate on God for a few days in solitude. No doubt you say that you would like to give up your work. Captain said the same thing. Worldly people talk that way, but they don't succeed in carrying out their intention. There are many pundits who speak words of wisdom, but they merely talk. They don't live up to them. They are like vultures which soar very high, but keep their gaze fixed on the charnel pit. What I mean is that these pundits are attached to the world, to woman and gold, to lust and greed. If I hear that pundits are practicing discernment and dispassion, then I fear them. Otherwise, I look upon them as mere goats and dogs. Prankrishna saluted the master and took his leave. He said to M, will you come with us? M, no, sir. Catch me going with you again. And goodbye. Prankrishna laughed and said, I see you won't come in the boat then. Right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and stop there. Stop recording for this week.